All right, let's just jump right in. What if you could stop writing code and just start managing it instead? That's the huge, powerful promise behind this new tool from Google called Antigravity. And look, this is not just another coding assistant, okay? We're talking about a potential glimpse into the future of how we build software. So in this explainer, we're going to break it all down, what it is, how it actually works, and of course, whether it really lives up to all the hype.
No, really, I want you to think about that question for a second. For decades, right, a developer's whole job has been about grinding out code, line by painstaking line, it's just how it's done. But anti-gravity, it completely flips that script. It's asking us, as developers, to become managers. Managers of these autonomous AI agents that do all the heavy lifting for us.
So, let's talk about what that really means. What does this new agentic workflow actually look like when the rubber hits the road? And why is everyone calling it a true paradigm shift? Let's dive in.
Okay, this really lays it out perfectly. Over on the left, that's the world we all know, that familiar, sometimes tedious loop of write, debug, test, and do it all over again. But on the right, that's the agentic workflow. Your role just totally changes. You're not writing, you're delegating. The agent is the one generating the code, juggling changes across a bunch of different files, and get this, it even verifies its own work. Okay, so now that we have that new workflow in our heads, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the tool itself. What exactly is Google Antigravity? So the whole philosophy here is something called agent-first development, and this is the key difference. Think about tools like GitHub Copilot, right? They're great, but they just kind of suggest the next line of code. They're like a helpful assistant sitting next to you. Antigravity treats the AI as an autonomous worker. It can plan, it can execute, it can validate really complex tasks, all with very little input from you. So in other words, you're not just getting a suggestion, you're delegating the entire job. And yeah, this thing is brand new, like hot off the presses. It was only announced back in November 2025, right alongside Gemini 3, and they immediately dropped it as a free public preview. The latest updates were just this month, so we are absolutely looking at a platform that's in its super early stages. Now, for any developers out there, you're probably going to breathe a sigh of relief here. Under the hood, Antigravity is basically a heavily modified fork of VS Code, which is great. It means the core editor experience, all that muscle memory you've built up over the years, it's all still there. You're not having to learn a totally new environment from scratch. And one of its biggest strengths, for sure, is how flexible it is. This is not some closed-off, Google-only walled garden. Yeah, it's optimized for Gemini 3, but it also supports really powerful models from Anthropic and even some big open-source ones. This is awesome because it means you can actually pick the right brain for the job you're trying to do. All right, let's get practical. How does this all actually work? I think the best way to think about it is that these agents aren't just a tool. They're like your own personal digital engineering team. So when you fire it up, the interface is basically split in two. You've got the editor, which, like we said, is going to feel just like VS Code. But then you have the agent manager. People are calling it mission control, and honestly, that's a perfect name. It's the command center where you orchestrate the whole show, spawning agents, monitoring what they're doing, and watching them work together, all at the same time. So a typical workflow is going to look something like this. First, you just give the agent a high-level goal. Sometimes simple, like, hey, build me a snake game in Python. From there, the agent creates a super detailed plan for you to look over. If you like it, you give it the green light, and boom, it's off to the races, writing code, often across a whole bunch of different files. Then, and this is the cool part, it actually runs and tests the app to make sure it works. And only then, at the very end, do you step in to review the finished product. Okay, I know what you're thinking, because this is the question every single developer asks. Handing over this much control, it just feels risky, right? How in the world can you trust that an AI agent actually did the job correctly without you having to go back and read every single line of code it wrote? Well, Antigravity has a really smart answer for this trust gap. It's a concept they call artifacts, and they are exactly what they sound like. Concrete, verifiable pieces of evidence that prove the agent did exactly what it said it was going to do. And there are a few different types. So before it even writes a line of code, it gives you implementation plans. As it's working, you get standard code diffs, which you'd expect, but here's where it gets wild. It also gives you UI screenshots showing you what it built. And even crazier, actual browser recordings of its own test sessions. So if the agent says, hey, I fixed the login button, you don't have to take its word for it. You can literally watch a video of the agent going to the page and logging in to prove it. That's a game changer. Okay, so all of that sounds absolutely amazing in theory, but what's the reality of using this thing right now, today, while it's still in public preview? Let's dig into what actual users are saying, the good and the bad.
First, the hype. The excitement is definitely real, and a huge part of that is the price tag. Or, well, the lack of one. Since it's free during the preview and the quotas are pretty generous, people are finding just insane value in it, especially when you compare it to other tools that can set you back hundreds of bucks a month.
But then there's the other side of the coin, the reality check. This quote from another user on Reddit points to a major problem: file corruption. Some people are reporting these really serious bugs where the tool is actually damaging their codebase. And that's a big deal. It's something they say they've never run into with the more mature tools out there.
And look, these aren't just vague complaints from angry users. You can go on GitHub right now and see specific documented bugs. Like, here's a great example. On some Linux systems, the tool installs with the name Antigravity, but the program itself is hard-coded to look for a command called agi. So it just breaks. It's a classic, almost funny, early-stage software problem.
So yeah, the early verdict is definitely a mixed bag. The pros are huge, right? It's basically free for now. The whole multi-agent thing has massive potential. And that artifact system for building trust, it's brilliant. But the cons are just as serious. Performance can really chug on big projects. That file corruption bug is an absolute deal breaker for a lot of people. The plugin ecosystem is tiny compared to VS Code, and let's be real, it is nowhere near enterprise ready just yet.
So let's pull all this together. What does a tool like Antigravity, even with its flaws, really mean for the future of how we all build software? I think the most important takeaway is this. Antigravity isn't just another IDE. It's a massive bet from Google. A bet that the very role of a software developer is about to fundamentally change. We're moving away from being the craftsperson who lays every single brick by hand and becoming the architect who designs the blueprint and supervises the automated crew that does the building. And that leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. In a world where tools like Antigravity exist and are only going to get better, is the future of software going to be built by humans, or will it just be managed by them?